Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We will get started, and as we program proceeds, we will then allow other participants to rejoin us. So, as already pointed out, our next speaker are actually two speakers, co-presenters, Dr. Yash Chawla and Professor Vinod Menon. Dr. Chawla will be doing the main bulk of the presentation, but I will start rather. But I will introduce both speakers. Dr. Yash Chawla is a mechanical engineer by training, and he obtained his original training at the Delhi College of Engineering in 1971. He then proceeded to obtain an MBA from the Faculty of Management Studies at the Delhi University. He proceeded here. He specialized in export management, and he also proceeded to obtain a PhD in power sector skills development from Indira Gandhi Open University. He's a member of the International Emergency Management Society in Belgium. Now he works on getting accreditation for adding value to the resilience towards climate change, emergencies in critical infrastructure, with a higher focus on the power sector. Currently, Dr. Chawla is based in Sydney, but before arrival there, he worked as an advisor to the government of India. Specifically, he was attached to the Ministry of Power and Electricity Regulatory Power on electricity regulation matters, and also he worked in the area of renewable energy. Having located technologies that will benefit India, he worked on them for extensive periods of time. In the academic arena, Dr. Chawla has published extensively. He has authored or co-authored over 80 papers, chapters in books, and these have covered a diversified range of subjects. He has widely traveled in many countries across the globe, and he has also been posted outside of India and Australia in various countries around the globe. The second presenter is Professor Vinod Menon, who is an alumnus of Kerala University and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He's got over 37 years of working experience in areas of disaster management, disaster risk reduction, government affairs, public policy analysis. He worked as a professor in disaster management in Yeshwarno Rao Chauhan Academy of Development Administration in Pune. He was also one of the founding members of the National Disaster Management Authority of India, where he worked under the government of India. And he's been part of various international platforms on disaster risk reduction. And currently, he also holds the regional directorship of the International Emergency Management Society for Asia. And there, without further ado, I hand over the floor to Dr. Chawla and Professor Menon.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Greetings of the day to everybody. You can convert it to tailor-made greetings suiting your time zone. This subject of power is really a powerful subject. That is why it needed two speakers. And luckily, I am backed up by Professor Menon, who, with 37 plus years of experience, is supporting me on this venture. When we talk of disasters in power sector, a small glimpse. So everything is happening around power sector. What we are going to talk today is the future ready resilient power infrastructure. What should be the conceptual framework for that? And based on our perception as practitioners, there is a multitude of variables, and power sector itself is a heterogeneous sector in terms of variations. We have been seeing the monsters around us. We thought COVID was the biggest, and now climate change has been shown as the biggest. So what resilience framework is, from risk management to emergency management, is what we are going to talk about. And risk management is before disasters, risk mitigation and impact absorption, and risk adoption transportation is bouncing back after the disaster. These are the dimensions of resilience. And now these factors are all monitored and validated. Whatever disaster is happening anywhere, it is monitored. And poor fellow practitioner like me and Professor Menon, we keep on thinking how to get our system back. And we try to work out the methods where we can reduce the impacts of foreseeable disasters. When we talk of conceptual framework for futurity, first thing comes to our mind is Sendai framework for disaster resistance, which says four things: understanding the disaster risk, strengthening for governance, investing for resilience, and build back better. When we are talking about resilience framework, we have brought in two more frameworks over here. One is VUCA. When the disaster happens, emergency happens, the environment is VUCA, that is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and it has to be resolved by another framework called visioning of the leader skill, understanding, clarity, and agility. Or we may also call that we keep on learning new technologies, adopt to changes, and collaborate to strive for the global partner and experiment our thinking on that. There are various independent variables depending on each geography, each power station, each country, and those are to balance. We have selected a few of them. There may be many more. And these independent variables interact, and ultimate goal is to have power sector resilience of infrastructure, which is the dependent variable on all this. Now, what are the issues that get involved into this? The variability may be because of earthquake, because of floods, all wildfire, drought, and heat, etc. That means some money has to be invested into strengthening or hardening our infrastructure. And the World Bank team has calculated if we add 20% to thermal power plants, we improve the probability of resilience by 10 degrees. So cost versus probability. And it varies from various types of power generation and transmission and substation. So if you put the numbers of all these power stations over here, it picture shows like this. And then there are these green data are so many that research is further required. So we have cleaned up the last slide and put it all over here in this slide so that we can read it clearly. And these are our no data areas. And one more study has shown the poorer country with low GDP, like this, Romania, Bangladesh, and all that, they have less share of power outages because the power system is not extensively set up over there. But the GDP, high GDP areas have extensive network and they have more vulnerabilities. One more reason for this is that the rich countries have the old infrastructure which needs to be changed. When looking at the globe in terms of expected annual damages, being Indian, we first saw what is the status of India. But then we are talking about non-specific country in this seminar. So we have to see it globally. And China tops the list. Again, the old infrastructure. The preparing for readiness, there are many factors involved into this. There are 6 areas which talk of the existing regulatory framework, status of plans, the advanced technologies what are being incorporated. It varies from country to country. Training, hands-on training, resilient assets, and standardization of equipment. These are 4 areas which are to be undertaken by us: conceptual framework, financial mechanism, capacity building, and resilient incorporation of the technologies. Conceptual framework for power system, the resilience matrix is little bit complex. It goes into 5 levels: performance-based, non-performance-based, and if it is performance or non-performance-based, non-performance is consequences, the outcome. They are specific and general. So, what we are talking first mostly about specific. General is general, right? So, power supply load is to be reduced, or duration and frequency of curtailment, or how many consumers are getting affected. Similarly, on outcome based, it is geography based and safety and health, that is hospitals, etc., etc. Quantifying these disasters, there is a study done that all these vulnerabilities have been ranked from 1 to 9, but power sector being important, there is nothing called 1. It is minimum 7, right? Goes up to 9. The threats are anything from 1 to 9, the highest being 9, and course, see, lightning is very rare, so it goes up to 1. So multiplication of this horizontal row and the vertical is quantifying the risk, the threat likelihood, and vulnerability of the score sign. The leadership in this, everybody is expert. You, me, we are expert in our own areas. And your good work has to be taken up by me, and my good work you might like to take. And the examples are piling up because countries are working on this continuously. And if we don't work, we go into economic disadvantage. We have to make it future ready. Issues that may include are anticipating the disasters, checking of interdependent variables, what if analysis are to be done. Opportunities are many. So whether it is a power generation or power transmission and distribution, everything is affected, and all of this is based on disasters. And ultimately, we have to improve the resilience. When we talk of resilience, we naturally confine it to our own geographic area or country. But trouble is, nowadays, power is being given to the neighbors also, like even India is giving to Nepal and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and all that. The cross-border impacts have also to be seen. The disaster management science has become so big that yesterday, day before, Larry was talking about expanding the sections from 7 to TQC sections from 7 to 12. Presently it is 4. So they are, listed by us so far at the moment is 10 different philosophies. So what we have to do is we have to start the risk management efficiency, pledge to minimum competencies, which is the minimum. And we have to do it in steps, right? Then let it do those in 3 steps. The second one is do it in silos and raise the standard, engage the employees. And then this is called a high jump, then going for the long jump for the high level standards. I will request my mentor and co-author, Menon Top, to take on from here.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Chawla has given a very detailed explanation of the need for becoming future ready because power is a critical lifeline, critical infrastructure, which actually gets disrupted in most of the disasters, whether it is an earthquake, whether it's a flood, whether it's a hurricane or cyclone, or whether it's a tsunami, you find that power gets disrupted. So the lifeline, the critical nature of the lifeline, we need to really look at the frequency and impact of disasters is growing. And the climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters and extreme events are rapidly increasing. So severity and frequency is increasing. And climate change induced rainfall, which has become unprecedented. You've seen urban flooding, cloudbursts, and glacier melts and sea level rise are fast becoming the new normal. And the changing weather patterns and hyperlocal micro weather variability is destroying croplands, disrupting livelihoods and threatening the survival of small farmers due to floods, drought, hurricanes, landslides, glacier melt, etc. The collapse of the power sector infrastructure in disasters and extreme events paralyze the economies, disrupt water supply, and disrupt the functioning of banks, ATMs, stock markets, etc. And the routine life gets adversely affected if the power sector is not future ready and resilient. And this is actually something which we are seeing in most of the mega disasters which have been seen by many countries. And so what are the technology toolkits which can help power sector infrastructure to be future ready and resilient? Some of them Dr. Chawla has already mentioned, and we find that the use of artificial intelligence algorithms, the use of machine learning, big data analytics, scenario analysis, and simulation models, use of geoinformatics, the use of UAVs and drones in situations when you find that power disruption has happened. Where is the root of the problem? How do you really assess that? You can use that using UAVs and drones, and you also look at persistent scatter interferometry, PS-INSAR, LIDAR, and also INSAR, which are basically the technologies which are being used now, very advanced, to basically look at structural deformations which are happening. So you find that these are used in basically to really look at the displacement or deformations which are happening in critical infrastructure, including dams, including power and telecom infrastructure, and so on. And finally, the use of remote sensing and satellite imagery before, during, and after disasters is very important. We're finding that there is a lot of positive developments which are actually happening because of the use of remote sensing and satellite imagery. And finally, use of SCADA, which is the supervisory control and data acquisition control system architecture, using computers, network data communication infrastructure, and graphical user interfaces. So these are all the technology toolkits which are available. And I'm sure that Dr. Chawla's work will be very useful as a regulator. And over to you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, what we have done, my dear friends, what we have done today, number one, we have brought the lady also into our and on our platform, because yesterday it was told that there are less number of ladies. So it is being addressed. That conceptual framework for future ready power sector is presented today, and we thank you for that. What is offered to you is a consolidated view of holistic concept of global efforts, whatever is happening worldwide, giving a deep dive into the subject before writing and sharing knowledge on the issue so that further research can be taken. We have to take action, generalizing the similar framework for other critical infrastructure. See, telecommunication is one which is quite similar as far as distribution is concerned to power sector, and that also has a backup of data centers. Reinforcement updation. We have to keep ourselves updated. It will not happen that once we have gone through this seminar or we have read a book, will not finish, because it keeps on changing, and it is three subheads: is knowledge, ability, and analyzing. And we have to keep ourselves updated on our skills, and collaborate and partnership, which is UN SDG goal also. We all have to collaborate and make the world safe, not only a specific country or specific geography. The references we have made today is risk identification, risk management, economics, and planning, etc. The references of the total paper are given at the back, which which we are not sharing with you now. And I think Professor Vinod wanted a healthy debate on this. So I think we are leaving about 5 minutes to you for any questions or anything you would like to ask.
Thank you very much. And thank you for keeping the time. That was spot on 20 minutes. I really, when the full paper, which we will strongly suggest you consider publishing in one of the special issues that we will run concurrently with the conference. But what I'm saying is that the idea was very well presented. We have a question from William Croft. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much for that really illuminating presentation. I just spent a few weeks in Puerto Rico, where the entire island was almost completely without power for those couple of weeks following the hurricane. I actually volunteered with an organization that presented as gifts to the people hardest hit some solar-powered lights. The name of the organization is Watts of Love. But what I found was a lot of and what we just heard before your presentation were a couple of different ones on medicine and medical treatment and such, but the impact of that power shortage or outage to the various different aspects. Can you recommend any, directly after the crisis mitigation measures that you feel would help us bridge the gap? Thank you.
Mr. William, very good question. In fact, this is what I have been working on from 2004 onwards, when there was, cyclone in our island, Andaman Nicobar. And I am telling you, even today, we are suffering because of that. Number one, what India has done has gone in for solar, that is all right. But in Ireland, there's one problem. There is a cloud cover which comes very fast. So that means at that time, what will happen? That means you need storage. And because you have emergency services like hospital or dispensaries or medical centers, so power is important to those areas. And then we have given incentives for people to go in for solar rooftops. But we are suffering even today because the water came onto the ground, and that ground, agriculture is gone over there, from that area. So they were thinking of putting up a solar plant over there. But when I noticed, I said, if we put steel structures over there, they will get corroded. Idea stuck to my mind, and I did check up, and we have implemented that. I went to a boat maker. I said, how do you cover the boat with fiberglass? He says, the steel can be covered. So that means the steel structure, what you are going to put on the ground where seawater has already interest after the cyclone, because it will corrode the structures. Kindly make it coated with fiberglass, including that bottom end where it will be supporting. Then it will be safer, and solar with battery is a good suggestion.
If I can just sort of also add, saying that what happened in Puerto Rico and what happened in the Hurricane Ian, which happened now, and you have actually seen that power disruptions are happening, which also distort telecommunication lines. So there is a need to really look at an integrated approach, because even water supply gets affected. So this is very important. We will look into some of these solutions and then also share them with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are gonna move. We had one more question, which I'm going to post in the chat. It is actually visible there. So we will proceed with the presentations, and then at the end of the session, I think we will have time to take more questions, if that's okay with the current presenters. Thank you, Dr. Chawla. Thank you very much for, thank you, Professor Menon, for your presentation. We will now proceed to the next presentation, which will be presented by Professor Nehat Kochinaj. I apologize if I mispronounced the last name. So our next speaker comes to us from Kosovo. He has an exemplary record of public service and academic endeavors in the areas of public administration, political science, emergency management, military service. Professor Kochinaj has served as the head of civil protection sector and emergency preparedness in the Prizren municipality from 2001 until 2003. He was also involved in as being the head of division of alarm and emergency coordination, or the 112 emergency call center in Kosovo between 2003 and 2008. He served as a senior officer for prevention from natural and other disasters in the Emergency Management Agency and related departments between 2008 and 2010. He continues to be active both in the academic and the practitioner field of emergency management. On top of his expertise, he's also well versed in dealing with various types of disasters such as earthquakes, floods, camp management for internally displaced people, and so on. Without further ado, I would like to hand over, and the title of the presentation is Time is a Readiness Factor in Emergency Response. Prof, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you. Great to see you all. Thank you, first of all, TIEMS, for opportunity given to me or our country to give our sounds from the ground and share our experience or knowledge during the past more than 2 decades in last development after the war at 99. The case with Kosovo or development science 99 was very, very specific from a different point of view. One of them, I believe, and we prove that is the building and development of emergency management system in country was a unique case. How it was started after 2000, and where we are actually in 2022. As a summarize from the same beginning, I will try to share with the audience our experience gained through 3 perspectives, maybe more or less, in this research, which is ongoing. It is not finished as a topic, but I believe that as a topic, as a specific issues need to be treated from the different perspectives because of importance as a factor, as a crucial factor. I mean, in sense of the readiness for response. Yes, more or less the readiness of system or society to respond to national emergency often overlooks the factor of time. It is a conclusion from the same beginning. Consequently, the response to emergency can often be slow or not in the appropriate time, which can result in irreparable consequences in the human and material cost. I believe that all of us agree with the position from this point of view. From this context, in terms of building the system and developing policies for the field of emergency management, country has included the factor of time in foundation law, first of all, foundation law for protection against natural and other disasters. Additionally, it has included the factor of time in the also 2 main strategic documents in their initial contents as national response plan and integrated emergency management system. From this perspective, so after the independence at 2008, in period of time for 2 years, not more, than 2008, 2010, for 2 years after independence, two strategic documents, as I said before, that national response plan as a main document based on is our system has continues with improvement after 2010, and also vice versa with a national response plan was the integrated emergency management system as a two main or strategic document based on Kosovo was built the practice and the further development in next more than 1 decade. Except those, Kosovo in pause period after 2000 adopt European unique emergency number, well known as 112, and through this adoption, focus was mostly oriented on the building and sustainability of the main hubs who will be in next 2 decades, and after that surely serve as main hubs to coordinate and manage any situation, emergencies or crisis from local to the central level, of course, and for international assistance or cooperation or deployment in case of needs. In this round, yes, about the adapting of European emergency number 112 was started in our country since 2001, with achievement in past 2 decades. In this context, we could say very surely that we are not so satisfied regarding our expectation based on the initial process of building and development this capability. Of course, mostly the specific aspect of this topic is time as determining factor in the quality of emergency service offered to citizens named or well known by first responders. In our country, they known as a capability of Kosovo police, the capability of fire rescue service and the medical emergency service as first responder response capabilities, who continuously measure the time response to specific incidents, and based on their measures on specific response to specific incidents, they build and develop their capability. And in past 2 decades, in past last decades, I like to say that they get a lot of improvement, especially the capabilities of well known as the first responders. The second aspects, which I mentioned before, was in this treatment the coordination to response as a country model. Country model, as you see in the right part of this slide, is based on the system of communication in emergency situation or crisis. Mostly, it is created based on the concept of European emergency communication based on 112 number, or well-known unique emergency number 112, which is adopted, as I said before, at 2001, but with those development from my perspective, we are not so satisfied because of many circumstances during this period of 2 decades. But in context of this topic about coordination of response, the communication system and information technology, which enables the successful coordination of emergencies, familiar with the relevant factors and the responsible institution in the country. Well known for us in this case that the EOCs are spread in the countrywide, operational 24/7, free of charge from all operators of or providers of telecommunication services in country. Let's go back shortly to the notion of time. Although the concept of time is everyday, is in everyday life, has a meaning of the development of a process or event, defined by starting and ending of that events or process. The focus of the study will be in initial steps to substantive dimensional time factor and indicators on the one hand, and other hand as a guide for the further development or opportunities for improvement in continuous. All based in harmony with basic goals, which is achievement of the fulfillment of structural obligation in front of citizens and the living to protect their lives, material goods, and environment at all. It all begins with a critical analysis of the journey from the perspective of emergency management, impartially identify developments and the lies in relation to either treatment of phenomenon and process, as well as the opportunity for objective circumstances in the period of 20 years from the end of the war. Mostly time factor in terms of readiness for emergency response, which is the crucial for this treatment. Always in research was based with the main aims on the well-known aspect of coordination, command, and control, which as the three part of the crucial in this terms of readiness for emergency response. We believe that coordination, command, and control know to save time if the coordination as well planned before, command is in place and in coordination with all other factors or resources, and control, it is as a main factor which determine the further or future development or way of or direction of improvements. Interval phase determined by, also defined in the reference at SUCO and International Cooperation Division 2017, which you will get as a reference. And finally, from this point of view, how much the system or its parts in emergency management in Kosovo are in harmony with these factors, the elaboration aspects will try to answer inseparably linking with the development of emergency management system, the practice built in Kosovo in the emergency management support, and experience gained from the governance period of the UNMIK period of 1999-2008, from where we as a country and system started to build our capability. And in this period of time was well defined the field of emergency management, mostly with focus on emergency preparedness, which is a component of cycle of emergency management, very important, as each of them, both preparedness has a full sense in fact in terms of time. More about this context, or from framework based on the Kosovo perspective, early warning system aspect from the elaboration context is a practical in following the reference, as you see in the down part of the slide, as well from the risk reduction strategy aspects, which is as a document, as a policy, was started at 2011, 2012, second review, and the third 2016, 2019, and the last one as a risk reduction strategy was in process of review 2021, 2025. And all of them are based on our concept or cycle. We treat each type of disaster or emergency in the cycle, well known for all of us, I believe, from prevention phase, preparedness, response, and recovery after an incident or emergencies. So, which are main characteristics of built system and influencing circumstances during this period? A system built in accordance with well accepted international norms and standards proves that the fact that emergency management system in Kosovo began to build under the or during the period of the international mission in Kosovo, named UNMIC, from my point of view, since 1999-2008. As such, this stage of building institution proved and applied the well-known principles in reference BBB, which for all of us well known, I believe, also, which as a principle was also applied in building of institution and the civil society and society development at all in Kosovo from the period of 1999-2008 till declaration of the country independence on February 17, 2008. We know that time, and we repeat a lot of time, that time is a factor in emergency response, emergency preparedness factor for response from this perspective. From the very definition and the title, the derivation of definition advanced with the time factor and the specific importance that this factor has in raising preparedness to face emergencies. In a way, defined even closer to the topic, as well as to the place of or a system within which the time context is elaborated, widely known among the people is the time is money. Beyond this, has a meaning of treatment of analytical deliberation with consequently falls to logical conclusions that conclude with the undertaking and well-planned action in time, as well as coordination and implementation at the right time, which actions are an elaborated part and the preparedness procedures or plans has been developed before. And those saves, among others things, time, but also money in a significant manner, simply by reducing potential damage, which have financial costs. Above all, time is life in the true sense of the word, which lessons we identified and we find a place for improvement in next period of development. Mostly, from my perspective, the political stability of the country and governance is a factor of special importance. The fragility of democracies in transition, from my opinion, are a factor for reason of ensuring the sustainability of achievement in certain period of time. Second one, reforms and revisions of the course of action with a lack or no prior strategy or institutional development about where and how developments in the field of emergency management should be oriented is the main and so important, because not rare the institutions know to develop their capability or part of their capability from time to time or from case to case. And in this context, if they work or build their capability without prior strategy of institutional development, in this case for emergency management or crisis management, it would consider as a loss of times, loss of money, a loss of everything, or recycle. Third one, government and social investment, insurance companies, lack of voluntary capacity in the preparedness to face unexpected situation and disaster, and the establishment of development of the coordination and communication system, about which topic I have tried to share with you few minutes ago. The fourth one, from my perspective, is urban developments. In transition countries, overpopulation of certain centers with a significant lack of planning, especially from the aspect of safety from disaster, increase the real possibility of significant damage to life, property, and lost one for this purpose. The fifth, threats to the security environment from situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, consequences from climate change, as well as the Russian invasion of Ukraine, further reinforce the social and governmental obligation to address public security challenges within a well-defined strategy. Yes, experience from the emergency management system in Kosovo are based on the well-known, regulated on our legal base, step-by-step, based on principles, step-by-step deployment of response capabilities. And there's slide, part of the slide in the right side, will describe how we manage, how we organize in chronological way our deployment or activation of our capabilities. Conclusions. Relevance of examination from the matter of treatment is and have the impression that it was open topic science social system are the dynamic and always developing. Logically, also the capacities and capabilities will sometimes be even more dominant for operation. The case with management of the COVID-19 pandemic in Kosovo reference, us in our friends, I don't need maybe more to get insights. And the last one, it will be maybe same end of this presentation in short point. Thank you for attention, and I'm open for question.
That was very interesting presentation. It must be very difficult to manage a new system that you implement as best practice, or aligning yourself with surrounding countries when the country has just been born, and when you're still facing certain existential threats, and not really being in a neighborhood where all your neighbors are friendly. So that is really, really amazing what you have managed to accomplish. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions. If there are any, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will then take it from there. I don't see anything. Thank you very much for the presentation. We will still have time for questions later on if there any arise. We will then proceed on to the next speaker. So our next presentation will be by William Croft on integrating a crisis response campaign. The background of the speaker is actually quite impressive, just like all our presenters up to date, up to this point. William has a career as a peace builder, an innovator, and a leader in international collaboration and cooperations with specific focus on working in the U.S. Army Civil Affairs Division, and also working with the United States Agency for International Development. He has extensive experience through his 2 full tours in Afghanistan, which focused on building infrastructure and system to enable peaceful initiatives and development in crisis situations and conflict zones. William has an extensive academic portfolio of achievements. These include NATO Crisis Management Disaster Response certification, and also a Master's of Business Administrations from the University of Texas at Austin, and also an international degree from a higher education institution in Germany. William does a lot of outreach activities. He's involved in multiple NGOs, and I will then hand over for him to take us through his talk.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here and listening to my talk. And thank you especially to TIEMS and Mr. Draeger and Professor Taudrit. So as Roman just said, I have about 3 decades of working with the U.S. Army, and throughout that time as a civil affairs officer, I also worked directly with USAID. So these 3 photos that you see and the various different logos from the organizations represent various different things. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see flooding in Afghanistan. And at the time that happened, I was actually in host of Afghanistan, and we assisted the UN Development Program and other entities, the World Food Program and so on, with helping the displaced people, as well as providing food, water, and other services. One can see the entire Operation Enduring Freedom as a crisis intervention as well. And of course, the most important aspect was that we were seeking to provide a better future, balanced, impartial, and fair, based on gender and various other aspects. And to a certain degree, we did have some success with that. And then finally, the third picture, the back of the aircraft, shows when we were bringing some of our friends and allies out of Afghanistan in August, September of last year. And so the 2 different things that are really demonstrated also is that the U.S. military operates in non-permissive environments, whether because of a climate catastrophe or because bullets and bombs are flying. Additionally, one of the main capabilities that we can offer, of course, is logistics. And that's both in planes as well as trucks, railroad, whatever else. And so with that in mind, I'd like to focus on the 2 words in the title, integrating and campaign. Integrating really gets to the heart of synchronizing, coordinating, aligning the time aspect. As we just heard how important time can be, it's so important for us to work with one another. And then the other piece that's important is the campaign. And a campaign is a series or linking of activities that achieve a specific goal. And let's take, for example, Operation Allies Refuge and Allies Welcome. When we brought the Afghan people, friends and allies, through Germany and then on to the US and other locations, it was so important that we had relationships that had been built over scenario planning and then testing those scenarios and plans with simulations, TTXs, as we heard about earlier. I'm currently taking a couple of online courses with the Harvard Extension School, and what we're learning there is about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And one quote that really sticks out in my mind was that we should never waste a good crisis. A crisis can be seen as an opportunity, for changing how we do things, doing the right things the right way, and sharing best practices with one another. And as we also heard, when we're seeking to alleviate suffering and assist with expectations and helping a country move forward, redundancy can be very important in order to address multi-use challenges. And then finally, one aspect I'd really like to address before we start a discussion with one another, kind of a dialogue, is the whole idea of mental health and the importance of that, maintaining that on an individual, but as well as on a team and even organizational level. I, for example, am a yoga instructor and have found a daily practice in yoga and yogic breathing that helps me remain resilient, but then also to interact more favorably with my colleagues and partners. Nonviolent communication is one aspect of team or organizational resilience building. There's also, there are different books that are available. For example, Team Emotional Intelligence 2.0, that addresses the idea of a team interacting more effectively with itself and across boundaries. Okay, so as a final aspect of my talk today, I would very much like to encourage you. I really would like to encourage a discussion by posing a couple of questions. So civil affairs is really interesting because most of us reside in the Army Reserve. That means that we have careers outside of the military that are our primary careers. Now, I very much enjoyed listening to all of you today and hearing your insights and expertise. And imagine, for example, for a moment, that in your early 20s, you signed up for, went through initial training, and then entered the military in your respective countries. Now, when there might be an international crisis, you would be called up to go there, and you could do one of two different things. Either you could assess the various different aspects of things that are happening on the ground, and with your expertise, for example, in power management, you would be able to understand the challenges that the power company is facing. Additionally, you might also have tremendous experience in negotiation or banking or something like that, and advise high-level managers or government officials on different aspects of how they might use this crisis to develop their country, take it up to the next level. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to ask you what your experience working with with various different militaries, not just the U.S. military, but various different militaries might be. What is your perception of them? And what opportunities do you see that you might have working with them more in the future? How could in my case, the U.S. military, how could we meet your expectations better and integrate with you more fully? And with that, I'd like to open it up to anyone who'd like to respond to those questions. Thank you.
Let me just put my 2 cents to start the discussion. I actually think that's a really valid question, and I think you don't even have to go too far. I would draw on the background that I know, which is water scarcity and water quality problems, and we saw really well how South African military has actually assisted the population quite extensively in the last couple of years. Providing sanitation, helping clean up sewage treatment plants which have broken down, and sewage spills have basically become a common occurrence. they're now starting to have knock-on effects, such as sinkholes opening up in perfectly normal functioning residential areas. And then I saw a common feature of that in Flint, Michigan, where the and similar, or Jackson, Mississippi, I think was the last point, where the US military basically came in and without discrimination provided assistance with safe drinking water to everybody. I think that is the kind of inputs or situations I would emulate, and that's where I would see my personal background coming in. Okay, do we have any further comments from the floor? Either the panelists or the attendees, please type them into the chat or feel free to use the QA box.
Let me add, number one, in my talk, I had used a term called cyclone for Andaman Nicobar, which actually was tsunami, because I happened to be there and Pondicherry. What we did, because there was no hosting, no water, and it was a sea-based geography. So we had very fast, I was working with the Israeli company at that time, we had very fast created desalination plants very quickly so that this water can be desalinated from the sea. That's number one. Number two, tenants for quickly building the housing, because under the shelter is there, where will they stay? It happened to be end of December, 26th of December 2004. So housing was to be provided, and then the sanitation for them. Again, quick sanitation was arranged for them. Of course, food was coming by various organizations who were providing the food, etc. So this collective action is a must. That is very important.
Would anyone else like to share your perspective, your insight, please?
Could we maybe ask some more of the panelists to put in their thoughts? Because I thought that might be quite useful, given that we still have quite a few presentations coming, and maybe this can stimulate the discussion in the context of the previous and the upcoming talks.
I would like to make a couple of observations, because the role of armed forces, either the civilian army or air force or navy in a conflict zone can actually become problematic in situations when you have the local army or even non-state actors. Because this is also one challenge which we have seen in many countries, where you have the UN defense peacekeeping operations, the DPKO, which actually works in some of the countries where there are military dictatorships. So, you may actually have situations in countries. We also listened to a few presentations. I think the role of the armed forces is actually something which has to be extremely sensitive and handled in a very careful manner in conflict zones. And that is what I just wanted to bring.
Thank you very much. I agree with you fully. Capabilities need to be balanced with authorities, right? Just because you can doesn't mean necessarily that you should, right? And it needs to be handled at I actually, at the NATO Center of Excellence for Crisis Management and Disaster Response, one of the courses that they offer deals specifically with crisis diplomacy. And that's extremely key. Thank you so much.
And I think there is also the need to look at people-to-people interfaces. We have seen that in India and Pakistan, the track 2 dialogues, which are happening between diplomats and also between opinion leaders and thinkers and media professionals and civil society, activists who are actually peace-loving people who want to really work to bring the communities together across countries, across borders, I think is extremely important.
All right. Are we right around 20 minutes? I've lost track of where we are.
We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, so you still have the floor.
Okay. If anyone else would like to share at this moment, I welcome it. Otherwise, I'll conclude. Okay. So integrating a campaign within crisis management, some of the key objectives that we can achieve are sharing with one another awareness and tools. And as we heard earlier, it's so key that we identify the right people, share different processes, do some scenario planning, test those different processes that we put in place early. The second piece is learning. We can share best practices. We can learn with and from one another. And then the third piece that I'd like to emphasize is building an integrated whole so that we have a balanced approach. We consider all of the stakeholders and we avoid any secondary or third order effects that might actually hurt our effort in the long run. It's really about sustainability and turning this particular crisis into an opportunity. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for the practical insights that you have provided. Ladies and gentlemen, given the nature of the discussion that just took place, I suggest that we move on to the next presentation. That will be by Simona Cavallini on cities facing the new challenges of climate change, cases in Europe. Welcome. I will provide a brief bio sketch to introduce Simona, and then I will hand over the floor and we can take it from there. So Simona Cavallini has been the head of research and innovation and at the Fondazione Formit Foundation since 2010. She holds a master's in economics from Corripe Piemonte, and she has also been working towards a PhD at the Department of Public Economics at the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and currently has also completed several courses in applied economics there. She's got an extensive background in working at the national and international level projects with different organizations such as ministries in the Italian government, director generals and other structures inside the European Commission. She's also collaborated with various agencies inside the United Nations systems, and she has successfully completed and currently works on several EU-funded projects. Simona, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roman, and good afternoon to all the participants. So, my presentation focuses on these European cities that are facing the new challenges related to climate change. I would like just to present you the crucial role that has been taken by the cities and the urban areas in this domain, and trying to investigate how European cities are responding to the challenges of climate change. The IPCC assessment report, the last one published in 2022, tell us that the impact of climate change is increasing, and it tries to focus on the city's perspectives. We have some climate risk to which people and infrastructure in cities are exposed, and these kind of risks are becoming increasingly intense, complex, and difficult to manage. This report provides 4 key messages for cities. First of all, it's clear that human health, livelihoods, and critical infrastructure are being damaged and disrupted by worsened climate impacts. And is not only a direct effect, but these climate changes are also creating more and more cascading impacts and dominant effects through the supply chain, through interconnected services. And in cities where population the number of citizens is quite important and quite intense, this is increasing the potential negative effect. Unfortunately, second point is that the urbanization occurs sometimes in highly exposed areas. So this is increasing the vulnerability to climate impact. Again, informal settlements are most at risk. So areas that are socially and economically marginalized are more affected by climate change. Last but not the least, looking at the citizens, we know that impacts of climate change are affecting more and more vulnerable groups, including poor people, disabled people, and so on. So the challenges for cities is very important because most of the world population lives in cities. So my research is focusing on how cities are facing these challenges. But my research, as my expertise in Europe, focus on the European situation. And I would like to give you some examples, 3 case studies in European cities, and try to answer to these main 3 research questions. The first one is how European cities are facing the increasing challenges connected to climate change, which are the measures and approaches that local authorities in Europe are taking into account to face the effects of climate change, and which financial resources are local authority using. And I would like just to detail a little bit some case studies of cities of intervention that they have taken in the last years. First of all, Amsterdam. Amsterdam is a city around 850,000 inhabitants. And one of the initiatives that they undertaken in the last 3 years, more or less, is the Resilio project. The Resilio project is one that is focused on resilience network of smart, innovative, climate adaptive rooftops. It's funded by Urban Innovative Action. The main beneficiary is the city of Amsterdam, that is working together with the research center, private sector organization, and NGOs. And the challenges that they are going to face are related to flash floods, to heavy rainfall, higher temperatures, and increased droughts. This kind of project received from European funds around less than 5 million euros. Why this kind of initiative and why this kind of project? Just a couple of words on Urban Innovative Action. Is especially for our colleagues that are not for Europe, is a special initiative of the European Union that try to provide urban areas, so it's very focused on urban areas in Europe, with the resources to try innovative, unproven, and risky, in some cases, solution to address what we can call the urban challenges. So in the last 7 years, more or less 372 million euros were devoted to these urban challenges. The city of Amsterdam chose something that is related to the climate change. These funds are addressed to cities that has more than 50,000 inhabitants, and 80% of the cost of the project are sustained by the European Union. This type of funds is no more available, as you see, because it closed in 2020, but it's replaced by the European Urban Initiative. So more funds and more topics to be addressed for the cities in Europe. Just a few words on what Amsterdam did. The project focused on a problem that is related to the fact that the inner city of Amsterdam has limited, scarce public space, so they cannot work on the ground. So they decided to exploit the rooftops, creating a living laboratory with 10,000 square meters of green and blue roofs on existing social housing and privately owned real estate. The idea is to store in a green layer, to build a green layer on the roof, and then store rainwater that can be used in drier periods. But the one of the, I think, the most important innovative aspect of this system is that there is a smart flow control, so that anticipates heavy rains or drought, and all the roofs are connected in a network, and there is a platform, something like a decision support system that can manage the roofs and the valves that manage the water flows. This intervention is focused on what is called green roof infrastructure. So is increasing this concept in the European cities. So it's something that is related to incorporating natural landscape in public spaces. That is the green part. And combining with good water management, that is the blue part. So increasing funds and increasing initiatives are on these types of infrastructures. Second case is related to Athens. Is no more a co-funded project by the European Union as it was for Amsterdam, but it's something specific requested to European Investment Bank. Again, more or less 5 billion euros. The cost will be higher because we are talking about not a co-funding, but is a loan, a financial instrument that is set up together with the European Commission that is focused, because the name of the fund is Natural Capital Finance Facility, is focused to finance projects that are expected to have a positive impact on biodiversity or use of nature-based solutions for adaptation to climate change. The support is not only in terms of capital, but also in terms of technical assistance that support the preparation, the design, and implementation of the projects that can be funded. And this activity was only addressed to the city of Athens. That was the only beneficiary, and was the first city financed with these instruments. And this financing started at the beginning of 2019. What Athens did with this kind of funding? Again, there is a problem related to the fact that the construction covers 80% of the city surface. There is a lot of asphalt, there is a lot of concrete. So what happened is that this situation retained during the extended heat waves. And in some cases, there are some urban heat islands that in the city center that can be more than 10 degrees warmer than the suburbs of the city. So the intervention aims at creating at least 20%, 25% more of green areas, and introduce some climate adaptation measures, including what we mentioned before, green and blue infrastructure projects of different types. Again, this intervention and this loan, one of the requirements for being funded was the fact that there was a strategy, and Athens define its resilience strategies for 2030 according to the guidance that is set by the International Urban Network of 100 Resilient Cities, involving a lot of the stakeholders of the city itself. And this plan has inside 4 pillars, and one of them is red to green. So they got the funds from European investment banks, thanks to the fact they have a medium-term strategy related to greening the cities. And the third case is a small city, quite small cities in Spain, that is Valladolid. More or less 300,000 inhabitants. And this is initiatives, this project is funded with, let me say, that the most known and important funding instruments that we have in Europe, that is Horizon. It was funded by Horizon 2020, that is currently replaced by Horizon Europe. What we are talking about, last 7 years was slightly lower, the amount, but for the next 7 years, we are talking about 95.5 billion euros for research and innovation. So a very huge amount of funds for organization in Europe, including cities. And according to the definition of the European Commission, one of the key points is to tackle with the climate change effects. Because of in the policy agenda of the European Commission, this aspect is now a top priority. Just to come back to Valladolid, what they did, they apply for a project related to nature-based solution. The title of the project is Urban Green Up. The beneficiary is no more just one city. We focus on municipality of Valladolid, but it was a project that involved other two, we can call them front-runner cities, Liverpool and Izmir. Other two follower European cities, Ludwigsburg and Mantova. And according to the idea of international cooperation of the European Commission, other cities that are not European were involved as observers. So Medellin, Chengdu, and Quilon, together with the research center and private sector organization. This is very important in terms of amount project, because the funding of the European Commission was almost 40 million euros, and more than 2 million euros went to the municipality of Valladolid, which were the climate-related challenges. Again, high levels of disconnection among green areas, the island effect, poor air quality, and flooding caused by the river that is crossing the city of Valladolid. How the city decided to face the challenges in the project, the municipality is supposed to adopt, as one of the results, is supposed to adopt a sustainable urban development strategies, increasing the connection of green areas in the cities, and there are some specific intervention that will be funded with the European funds. So are 4 classes of this intervention. One is related to drainage and urbanization, so ranging for cycle lane and bike lanes, but also planting trees. Again, water intervention, so not only green but also blue. For instance, the installation of a sustainable drainage system to manage the floodings of the river, and then building some green infrastructures, vertical and horizontal. For instance, again, we are talking about roofs and practice such as urban farming. Last but not the least, these funds are used to increase the awareness of citizens about the risk of climate change and engage them in activities that are improving the public spaces and make them more resilient to the effects of climate change. These kind of projects are, we mentioned before, are innovative, are innovation actions. So the European Commission needs to fund them if there are some concrete expected impacts. One of them, for instance, is lower the temperature during summertime of 2 degrees in certain part of the cities, reduction of carbon dioxide, saving, for instance, in case of floods, 5,000 square meters of urban land, and avoiding issues related to flood damages to 8,000 cities, and so on. some conclusion on this kind of investigation of case studies of cities that were funded. Let me stress that these are funding that are received on competitive basis. So European Commission set a request from some project ideas of cities, and then cities in Europe alone, together in partnership, compete to receive this fund. So in some way, these are selected by quality, by competition ideas that receive funds. I will try to answer to my three questions with the presentation of these three case studies. How the European cities are facing the challenges connected to climate change. First of all, with the strategy, with the policy related to adaptation and mitigation. We saw that in a couple of cases, one in the case of in case of Athens was more or less a prerequisite to be funded. The second case that is Valladolid is something that is needed to build, let me say, a pipeline of project or intervention that has an overall goal to increase the resilience of the cities to climate change. Which measures and approaches, and then from the operational point of view, we see a plethora of activities of action, such as renovation of building, green and blue infrastructure, but also structural involvement of citizens that should participate in the urban context to increase the resilience to climate change. Which measure and approaches? We are talking about essentially adaptation and mitigation and resilience when the municipalities, the local authorities are taken into account, because according to the different countries, they have more or less civil protection powers, and they have also different structuring integrated with civil protection, firefighters, and what we call first responders. So the main action in terms of fighting climate change is related to mitigation and adaptation. So we are talking about prevention and preparedness, and not our funded recovery solution, because this is in the vision of the European Commission. Which financial resources are using? Essentially ad hoc and targeted funds that, let me say, in Europe we are lucky because are increasing in number and in amounts in the next years, but remain still focused on not ordinary order intervention. What we have are some structural funds that are devoted to cities and regions in Europe for improving some situation in cities, but are very spot intervention. If you would like to see right now structural intervention, as intervention in the midterm and mid and long term, having a vision, unfortunately, we have to rely on funds that are on competitive basis for the moment. I think that as the climate change is no more an exception, so the impacts, the events related to climate change are no more exceptions. We have to think some policy and some structural funds more important to increase the level of the resilience of European cities against these increasing challenges. Some key reference, and I would like to thank you all of you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simona. That was really insightful and really comprehensive analysis of and answers to the research questions that you said at the beginning of the presentation. It does provide a really good outlook about some of the strategies that the cities in Europe are adopting to deal with climate change. I think there's also a lot of lessons that can be devised as best practices and could potentially be studied on an inter-regional basis. I can see that one or two of the things you mentioned, especially in Valladolid, could be adopted in cities in South Africa. Some of the challenges that you spoke about, speaking from personal experience, I think we could easily localize and adopt. Ladies and gentlemen, are there any questions for Simona about her talk? Please type them into the chat or into the QA box. I don't see anything, so thank you very much for now. We will proceed to the next speaker, but we will set aside time after this session and also later on before we conclude today to see if there are any outstanding questions, and we will either answer them over Zoom or in person or pass them on to Simona and our other presenters via email. Thank you very much for your presentation. That brings us to the last presentation. Thank you. That brings us to the last presentation in this session. That will be by Kelly Maguire. The title of, we will slightly change the topic of this from the previous several presentations. We will listen to a talk on refugee identity and health in South Africa. This will be by Kelly Maguire, who is a master's student at Rhodes University, specifically working in the Faculty of Pharmacy. She recently obtained, in 2020, obtained her Bachelor of Pharmacy degree from the same institution. And she's been working in the field of disaster management for the past 4 years. She's currently one of the TQAC candidates that you've heard about before, earlier in the week. And she will also be talking to us about some of the links between refugees, how we view them, and how the healthcare system must take that into account. Kelly, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Maguire. I'm busy doing my postgraduate study on the refugee identity. I just want to give some context first. So the refugee identity at public health and disaster risk management is because of how the refugees interact with risk, how their lives are shaped with risk. So they are one of the most, they have the highest level of vulnerabilities if you look at disaster risk management and hazards and all of that. And they can give us some valuable lessons on the minimum criteria of health and standards. If we can apply that to refugees, we can apply that to our cities and our society as a whole. So the refugee identity and health in South Africa, 100 years since 1918. So before COVID, it was 100 years since the last global pandemic, the Spanish flu. Obviously, COVID has changed this narrative and become a global risk. This global risk is not only associated with its health consequences, but also with the compounding and complex risk connotated to it. The economic ramifications of reactive disaster risk management measures focused on response and recovery have still not been quantified. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, lessons learned from the Spanish flu actually aided the world in its response to the coronavirus. These two pandemics had certain similarities that were taken advantage of in the form of non-pharmaceutical containment measures. What we observed in the pandemic was that humanity accepted these social norms of wearing masks to detect and mitigate the disease infection rates in society. So quarantining and social distancing, ideas born through the lived experiences of those in the Spanish flu, were applied to the COVID-19 pandemic. Infection control of hand washing and wash principles was heavily integrated into society. The global pandemic introduced a risk to everyone that allowed for the quantification of human life and their shared societal responsibility to help preserve it. These effects meant that the non-pharmaceutical measures to reduce and control the spread of the pandemic and COVID-19 surges worked. So public health is the science of protecting and improving the health of people and their communities. This means that it's basically about preventing and mitigating disasters that will impact the health of individuals and communities negatively. This definition of health is according to the World Health Organization, where it sees the health as the complete well-being in terms of physical, mental, and social well-being of an individual. So it's very complex. Health risks are also compounding. They add on top of each other. So even if a health risk has positive outcomes, it can have negative side effects. So COVID-19 showed us that risk is a spatial and temporal anomaly that transcended borders. It transcended the borders of academia and academic disciplines. Basically, it showed us what we do not know. It took risk into the unknown. So risk in public health also became globally entwined. So health risk can be local, regional, countrywide, global, as we've seen. It crossed borders, boundaries, and dimensions that we used to facilitate our decision making. These borders can be academic knowledge on how to handle risk in public health. So as mentioned before, if risk is a spatial and temporal anomaly that transcends borders, what happens when risk has transcended the borders of our knowledge? What do we do? In the COVID pandemic, we were at a point where risk outcomes and its side effects were unknown. And this is where disaster risk management and its concept of risk comes to play. In South Africa during the COVID pandemic, disaster risk management was competing with the health sector for control. So it's very interesting because risk doesn't necessarily have to be health-based, risk can become a health risk. So it's very complex to try and control it just within the public health sphere. So this is a tool I used to try and quantify health risk and also see the negative outcomes and negative side effects that could cause health consequences. So this is the disaster risk management cycle. It's based on the disaster management cycle, but this one is centered around risk and the risk that the THIN-DIE framework introduced. So disaster risk management and risk specifically is used to protect and improve the health of the individuals. I would classify risk now here as the potential of a disaster happening. So disaster risk management introduces the concept of risk, which is good because risk helps us deal with the unknown. This shows that the THIN-DIE framework had a major part to play, shifting response from reactive to proactive response, and helped us quantify the disaster potential. In the next slide, I try and basically show with the theme of disciplines, how risks can become transdisciplinary. So during the COVID pandemic, we used WASH techniques, which is public health control. It basically broke free from infection control, sterile manufacturing, all of those separate disciplines that used WASH techniques. Now, basically, it became an integrated response that became a societal norm where it was no longer just one discipline. It wasn't cross-disciplinary. It wasn't multidisciplinary. It was now an ethical norm. The spatial and temporal changes COVID-19 caused in societies allowed for the integration of WASH techniques into disciplines and into society's norms of life, the daily life. What we saw was that the risk of the coronavirus became a shared societal understanding, where it allowed for WASH techniques to transform into an issue of life preservation and was adapted into society. It showed the potential for a break in the fourth dimension of disaster risk management strategies. This fourth dimension was how long it takes for people to quantify and understand future risks. Because it was an ethical norm, people now understood that risk was just a way of life. They didn't even have to think about it. So risk is a vehicle for change. So risk breaks the fourth dimension of our reality, which is time, the response, how long it takes us to do stuff. It does this by integrating proactive responses into shared societal values. The time taken for people to quantify and understand future risk has become common practice and knowledge. So how do we contextualize risk in research? Ulrich Becht described risk or global risk in three features. The one I focus on with refugees is delocalization. So risk can either be man-made, as a lot of people before me have said in their presentation. It can be natural, but we're also witnessing a new era in our risk society where they're converging, they're compounding, and they're becoming so complex that they now are hybrids, where, as we can see in this example, you get pandemics, you get the refugee crisis. The refugee crisis can no longer just be blamed on a natural phenomenon or blamed on a war or a man-made situation. It is very complex. Another way to explain this delocalization of risk is to look at refugee risk in disasters management and health. So the SADC region, the South African Development Community, is made up of 16 member states of Southern Africa. And they created a framework in 2009, which is the South African HIV and AIDS Strategic Framework, which went from 2010 to 2015. Basically, this framework attempted to tackle the policy issue of internal migration within its member states and the health risks associated with it. It looked at regional integration of the refugee risk. What this means is that they understood they had highly mobile populations, that they needed to make sure that their chronic medicine was still continued. So in this framework, they made sure that HIV positive individuals would have access to ARVs, life-saving medicine, in any member state, even in a member state where they were seen as foreign. This is to make sure that their therapeutic outcomes weren't disrupted. What this shows is that this shows that they understood the concept of risk being delocalized. It was going to affect individuals not only in their own country, but those around them in the external environment, and showed accountability. So it's nice to bring this two together to show that risk is delocalized, especially in the case of the refugee identity. Health equity. Health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. Health being the highest level of health being highest level of physical, mental, and social well-being, which is a really hard task to try and tackle. They said to achieve health equity, you need to address historical and contemporary injustices, overcome economic, social obstacles, eliminate health disparities. In South Africa, and South Africa is in large, this is an enormous and very traumatic task because of our past histories. For the refugee identity and its risk to be classified and understood, risk needs to be classified and linked to societal specific values. So in the case of HIV and AIDS and the ARVs, HIV outcomes and side effects were understood by the population of South Africa because of our history with it. So it made it possible for us to integrate risk into those frameworks and for it to be able to be implemented. African philosophy is steeped in liberation and justice, which combats this injustice that we're experiencing to try and reach health equity. The Ubuntu spirit introduces morality in neutral situations. It allows us to see the human being without getting rid of our bias. We're still remaining neutral. It basically helps link risk to society's values unbiasedly. There is also a need for an anthropological study of the refugees' lived experience to be able to achieve health equity. So refugees are flaneurs. They are outliers of society. The degrees of vulnerabilities are very high. Their lived experiences are therefore valuable insights into the limitations of society's control, such as our health legislations or the South African Disaster Management Act of 2002. It shows you at what points society has control over nature and the individuals living at the edge of it. Control needs to be based on moral agency, such as Ubuntu or an African philosophy of liberation and freedom, to confront these limitations and demand that ethics thrive in this global risk society we now have to accept we're in. The refugee risk is now classified as emergency management with long-term ideals. To quote the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in 2009, they stated that we are witnessing a changed reality and that forced displacement nowadays is not only vastly more widespread, but is simply no longer a short-term and temporary phenomenon. The refugee identity is linked with high degrees of vulnerability And their unique experience of nature and society can help us to add the dimensions needed in quantifying risk potential. Climate change, urbanization, and migration are adding new dimensions to existing hazards and vulnerabilities. Countries need to expand their understanding of risk and therefore acknowledge their risk society to accommodate the emerging humanitarian crisis these displaced people are facing. We are in a risk society where risk can no longer be ignored, especially where human dignity is being violated. Thank you for listening to me. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for keeping the time. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions for Kelly Maguire? Please feel free to put them into the chat or type them into the QA box. Thank you very much for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes session 17. We have one session left for today. We are running a little bit behind schedule. So it's 13 to 4 US time. And we will reconvene at 5 minutes past 4 o'clock, which means we'll take 18 to 20 minutes for tea. And after that, we will proceed with the final session of the day. Thank you very much. See you shortly.